Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Anatomy of a Movie, as today we discuss X-Men Apocalypse in this Stuart McAvoy timeline. It's all so confusing. Deadpool had it right, and we're going to try to figure it out today on Anatomy of a Movie. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies. And now, here's Popcorn Talk's Anatomy of a Movie.
Yippee.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Anatomy of a Movie. There we go. There's Apocalypse. We have Demetri, Panos.
Hey, movie fans, how are you?
And we have Marisa, Serafini.
Hello, everyone.
And we have Professor Zach from the booth. Professor Zach Wilson to everyone.
Hey, guys.
Hey.
There we go.
He could be our Cerebro. He's in our heads.
That's right. Overall, before we fully get into it, as you guys follow along, you can download our rundown in the description below. That way you kind of get everything that we discuss. You know, there's a couple of nuggets that we might not necessarily get to that you might find interesting, but you can get it all there. And obviously we are very spoiler-filled, so if you haven't seen the movie, number one, what are you doing? Number two, pause, then come back.
Yes.
Sure. And join in the discussion if you have seen the movie and you're joining us live.
That's right. Let's get overall thoughts. Let's start with Demetri.
Well, you know, for me, I think X-Men Apocalypse is another solid entry into the X-Men series. I think what's been great about this series since First Class and Bryan Singer came back and took the reins is that Singer and team have made it where they don't, where the action or a story, they never predicate the action over the story. They take time making sure that, you know, we have good chemistry, good story through lines. They make them meaty. There are ethical decisions that may or may not, you know, have to be made. And, you know, it's a weird thing because I really liked First Class a lot. Days of Futures Past was really solid, you know, like a sequel to that. This one's being the third. And, you know,
Or
you can't...
sixth.
Or sixth. But you can't...
Multiple.
It's like you can't get away from the, is it better than or worse than this? And to me, it's a very slippery slope because in today's 140 character world, right? All you can really say is, well, it's not better than say Days of Futures Past. Okay, maybe not, but that still doesn't make this a bad movie. This is a really solid film, and I sort of kind of go like, look at the Harry Potter series, right? Very good movies. There might be some movies that you think are better than others, but they're still very solid movies. This one sort of kind of falls on that same thing. Like, this is a really solid movie. I can pick two other X-Men movies within this entire franchise that really sucked and made me angry, and this movie isn't even close to those. So I just want to predicate, well, I really did enjoy Days of Futures Past. This one may not have that level of intricacy of time travel, but it's still epic in scope. I love the characters. They introduced me to some new actors, some new characters. Love the dialogue, the partnerships, the chemistry, and some of the set pieces I felt were amazing.
I think Demetri and I saw completely different movies.
Why do you say that, Zach?
I don't mean, well, I'm curious to hear what Marisa and you feel. Like, I thought this was just a bad movie. Like, bottom line, like, not just as an X-Men fan or anything like that. I just thought it was a poorly written movie with very few character motivations and very little that intrigued me. I almost fell asleep twice.
Well, stop going to the midnight shows.
It was at 4:00 in the afternoon.
What about you, Marisa? Where do you stand?
Overall, I'm a big fan of the X-Men movie franchise. Those films are, you know, they're always just fun to watch. And I thought this one had its moments. It had some moments that were, like, really cool. And then some moments I'm like, okay, sure. I feel like a lot of there are some characters that were underutilized or we didn't see at all or were cut. We'll get into that. And then I felt like there were some that were overused that we didn't need that much of. I think this film had some issues with balancing of story concept and character development compared to what was actually going on in the overall film. It was fun to watch at certain moments. Overall, not my favorite X-Men movie, but fun to watch.
I overall liked it. I thought its biggest problem is that it's a good movie. It's not a great movie. And I thought the biggest frustrations that I have is that they just need to go more with certain elements, and it could have been a great movie. I thought it was a great twist that the only thing that Apocalypse didn't have was the ability from Charles, right? And that's a cool twist because if he himself believes that he's a god, Charles basically has the ability to control free will. And that would have been great motivation to really draw out of Apocalypse of like, I must get this power from Xavier. So to me, the fault, and it kind of seems across the board, is that it just comes down to the third act. If it had a slightly stronger third act, I think the people would leave the movie a lot more happier because the first 2/3, I think everyone, for the most part, from what I'm reading and what I've seen and heard, they agree it's those parts are strongest because it's individual philosophies and things like that. It's just when they come together collectively that it's not as strong, unfortunately. So, but and as we kind of go through it, obviously it's going to be a little bit easier to nitpick the stuff that didn't work. But I do want to say, overall, I did enjoy. I thought it was a fun movie, and I think it becomes harder to rank these things because what is this? The sixth one at this point of 2016.
That's if you don't include stuff like X-Men Origins, Wolverine.
Mm-hmm.
Which they do. And are you saying this movie was worse than Wolverine?
Oh no, I was saying in Phil's count of 6.
Well, I'm counting just superhero movies of this year, not X-Men.
Not of the friend. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
This year, 2016.
Although it was our second X-Men movie of this year so far, if you want to consider it that. Thanks to Deadpool.
Okay.
I mean, it had other X-Men in it too. You had Colossus running around.
Absolutely. So, and I think it's always tough, like, when you keep having to raise the stakes and go further and further, it's just always going to be tough.
Yeah, it is. Again, I just think with since Bryan Singer has come back, again, I'll point out, and again, Deadpool it's Deadpool. I don't call that. I don't just because 2 X-Men characters show up in it. To me, it's not an X-Men movie. It's a Deadpool movie. So X-Men Origins, Wolverine. I mean, it's called X-Men Origins Wolverine and X-Men Last Stand. I mean, you mean to tell me that this movie's worse than those 2 movies?
Oh, I wasn't saying that. I was purely talking about the count of X-Men movies.
Oh no! I'm still talking about.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
is it because the Wolverine movie and Last Stand? I mean, those are 2 movies that literally made me angry.
Honestly,
those are bad
here's my main thing. Is at in Apocalypse, I just found myself not caring enough about anything. Like Apocalypse rips the world apart. He destroys an entire city, seemingly killing millions of people, and I don't care. This is Phil. You're talking about the problem of scope and scale at this point, and I think that's the problem. Like in the last movie, they were going to wipe out the entire mutant race with Sentinels. And they had to tear apart the space-time continuum to fix it. That's harder to go. It's hard to go bigger than that, and they tried. Now the X-Men have taken on a god, but it's just they went so big that we weren't invested in any of the characters, and a lot of characters were behaving in ways weren't fully fleshed out or just lacked any clear motivation. I didn't really understand at the end of the day what Apocalypse wanted. Like, what was his key want?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with you there, Zach, too. I felt like this film had a trouble with character development of new characters. I mean, because we know who Magneto and Xavier are, like the ones that are returning, we know who they are, so we don't need to spend that much time on them again. But for the new characters, especially like the younger version of Scott and Jean, when I kind of wanted to learn a little bit more about them, just like for the character development on their end, because the way that, not to jump ahead, but at the end, I felt like their moments weren't earned, because there wasn't enough screen time, enough character development with them. So, yeah, and I agree with the whole Apocalypse and him, there was problems. I felt that there were some balancing issues of who's the real antagonist. Is it Magneto or is it Apocalypse?
I actually thought Storm had a great arc. Storm and Cyclops were like the two that I thought had a clear like beginning, middle, and end to their story. Like Storm coming around, like seeing somebody that can give her power that she's never been able to have in Apocalypse, and then seeing him fight her idol in Mystique. That's a clear arc that we can see, but Apocalypse didn't go through that. To me, the most interesting part of the movie was Magneto living in Russia or Poland or wherever he was, and his family.
Poland.
I wanted 2 hours of that movie. That's all I would have watched. Magneto just trying to live like a normal life undercover with his powers, and a family drama with his now mutant daughter.
And if I were to nitpick,
fascinating.
and see if I were to nitpick on the movie, that's the part that first off like annoys me with a lot of Marvel franchises, including the X-Men. I mean, it was great to see him live this normal life, and then he does something very heroic. He saves somebody from being crushed by like an iron vat, and nobody says thank you. Oh, it's just easier to say, oh, we fear you. Like the guy didn't even get up and go, I don't know how you did that. I don't care. Thank you very much. But instead, they easily go to the, oh my God, you've got these powers. We have to be afraid of you. And it's like that to me was always the problem. It's too easy to like.
Well, I think
stick to like race,
Like a little contrived.
Well, but that's the whole basis for the X-Men is being hunted as mutants.
But that's one of my biggest problems because it's too, like when he did something that was very altruistic and like he was a colleague and like he was even telling people, I've been over your house for dinner.
Had dinner.
Like not one person said, you know what, I'm gonna give you the benefit of the doubt because you've been a living part of this community, you have a family, you contribute. But no, he saved somebody's life and instantly they're like,
but
we're
that's
gonna lynch you.
but that's very true to life. I mean, there are absolutely real people who the biggest analogy for the X-Men are people in the homosexual community, and if you were, it didn't matter if you saved people's lives. There are places in the world where if you turned out that you were gay, they'll drive you out of town. It wouldn't matter how much you've done for other people.
I like to believe that we've come a little bit farther. I'm not saying that
but we haven't, unfortunately. That's the sad part about the world.
I like to believe that we've gone a little bit farther, that we're not. There is racism and prejudice out there to go uphill.
Well, I mean,
but he literally, right in front of everybody, saved somebody's life, and nobody said, thank you.
No, I get that too, but it was also in fairness to that like they found out that he was a world domineering person. They're like, oh, he's Magneto who tried to take over the world and kill everybody. So I think that's where the fear led into now we fear you. But I get it. It's a bad trope to always go back to, the being an outcast because you're different.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would like to hope that Hollywood and just the storytelling in general goes more than and beyond that, but unfortunately, just to add to it, the fact that he's already a pre-existing scary villain added to the audience, we should fear you.
And going back to Apocalypse, I mean, for me anyways, he's Old Testament type of God. He's in a world where number one, he learns from TV, and he sees there are false prophets, there are false gods out there, and he's coming from a time where there's like a god and to believe in, and he's like, no, like not gonna have this, and so that's where I was coming from. That's where I got coming from this, and that he was this god that he can't believe what Earth has happened, and I'm gonna get rid of all this, the scourge of the earth. The strongest will survive. And, he too himself is a false god in a sense, but he's not, his ego, his godlike ego.
Here's the thing. I would have liked to see, with him, and I in a minute I do want to kind of take it back because I think we've kind of just jumped into where everyone just wanted to. But in terms of him, I wish they explored that a little bit more because I did like him learning through the TV, the iconography, right? I mean, if you look at it, the symbols we have through all of humankind, I agree. Like, we worship the worst of the worst, and if you really kind of explore that, there's something there, but it didn't go. It could have gone a little bit deeper, I think. One of the things, to counter Marisa's point, and also in terms of where they were going with the development, right? I actually did like the introduction of the New Mutants, but I thought they did it in a way where it wasn't forced. Like, everything that happened for me didn't happen because, we have to set up this, we have to do this. I thought I'm a little bit more with Demetri on this, where I thought they handled it from a story perspective, and that it needed to be there for the story, not necessarily because, we have to set up the next sequels or whatever the case may be.
And to me, it's all a lead up to the first X-Men movie. I mean, one thing that Days of Futures Past didn't necessarily do, like, it didn't purposely do, was it didn't retcon Singer's first X-Men movie. It really took care to retcon Last Stand and where characters have gone. But I had to keep on, reminding myself that, okay, this is the young, Scott. Like this, like their first meeting, like this is eventually going to lead up until that first X-Men movie. That again, when you look at what the first X-Men movie did for superhero movies, there weren't any at the time, really. So I really enjoyed these pieces, these characters coming in and seeing them for the first time in that way. And good actors too were doing it. I thought it was fun. And like, these are the people in 1984 who are going to grow up and be the leaders of the X-Men that we know, so to speak.
Yeah, and what I appreciate, I mean, again, the timeline is skewed as such, but what I like, we got the Scott Summers backstory, right, which I thought was interesting, and in a way where he didn't end up killing anybody despite his powers. To see Jean Grey, I think we've kind of seen that was in a way Last Stand, and you could make it different and cool, but kind of why. But
they never really had what was, and again, what I thought was really cool how they handled Jean Grey is only at the very end of X-Men 2 where we get the very like the very Phoenix. Star Trek 2 ending-ish, where going over the lake, and Jean Grey's, Famke Janssen's over voices talking about life, death, and Phoenix. But I really appreciated the scene here where she goes all ablaze, and then you just see the remnants of a Phoenix, hinting of that Phoenix aura that became such a huge storyline in X-Men comics later on down the line. And I just like how they took the time and the detail to at least incorporate that. Yeah. So, and she was great, by the way. Sophie Turner. Yeah, I thought she was really good. I liked her a lot.
It was cool to see the Phoenix Force. I got excited because I was not expecting that at all. And I like that they had the screech. It was subtle in the way that a slap in the face is subtle. They were very much like, hey, we're going to do Phoenix Force in the next movie. But it was cool. I mean, it was because that was one of the only things they managed to keep quiet in all the trailers and build up towards the movie.
Yeah, I mean, like, it was cool and fun to watch. For me, again, character development, I don't think they developed Jean enough to get to that point where we were like, oh, hey, yeah, this was a totally earned moment for her, because we saw she was having nightmares and she was shaking the mansion. But again, it was out of fear. It wasn't out of control. And then when it got to that point when she actually like let that happen, she's like, all right, I'm just going to go full balls to the wall and take out this guy. I didn't see that connection. I was like, you weren't that person at the beginning, so no way could I believe that you could actually accomplish that at the end.
But she didn't do it on her own. She had the tutelage of Professor, Xavier. Like, she didn't just come up with that on her own. Like, she was being told by people much smarter than her, like, you have the power. You have to well this power. You can do. I mean, they were all at this school for the gifted for a reason. Yeah. And I also like that too, because
I don't think it was earned enough.
That became a nice theme as well, because I had always thought that the school for the gifted was like, bring these kids in, show them a home, teach them about their powers and how they can harness their powers. But there was a great thing that Raven, had brought up. Well, no, you need to prepare these kids for war. Like, this is what, they need to be battle tested, because this is going to happen time and time again, where that I always thought that's what the concept of the school was actually for, in a sense. So it was interesting for me to see that the school, he didn't want them to engage in war, and he sort of, now he himself learns, yeah, I guess we do have to test, because at the end they're in the danger room.
But I think Marissa's right on the point there, that like there wasn't enough time spent with her. We didn't spend her time seeing her as gentle or fearing a force inside of her that she didn't want to let out. There was nothing that like built up to it, which is part of why it was such a surprise. And I enjoyed it for the fan part of me that enjoys seeing like a cool comic book moment. But you're right, there was no
real lead up to it.
Yeah, there was no character drama built around it where I was worried that she might hurt somebody if she let out her power. She was not worried about that. She just didn't know that she had that power inside of her, and just not knowing is sort of flat.
Interesting, because I did get that she was a little bit afraid of her powers.
I think I got that. I mean, I think Raven, she's played a big part in all the movies, but I think when she took the leadership role, and especially in the plane when she's saying, our first mission, going back to first class, we were no older than you guys, and it was dangerous and things like that. And when she says the line, I think it's Scott who asks, like, hey, we're not fully developed, we don't control our powers, and she says, don't. And, you can take it as a silly line or whatever, just made for the trailer. But it actually could be, I think if you put weight on it, that could be the line that unhinges everyone and, makes them go, oh, okay, like, why do I have to control my powers and just let it loose? And especially, it's another thing, right? It is that differing opinion. It's one thing to control your powers in a situation when there's civilians, where there's humans, but not when you're fighting apocalypse.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the time to unleash everything you have.
Yeah. And I also like, too, that they sort of definitely Days of Futures Past was an Eric Xavier type of a story, in their two ideologies and such. I like this one where we had the Eric story, but I liked how it was a little bit more Raven. Like, we're actually, like, this is picking up after the events that happened in DC. This is what Raven has become. She's become Raven. And she's going to help other mutants. She's going to try to find mutants, and if they're in this crazy picture, she's going to get them out of that thing. That's her mission, which I really enjoyed that growth for that character. But we know where Raven ends up, but still, I thought that was a really good. I thought that was a great arc for her. And there was a little bit more Raven, that we saw her a little bit more in a leadership role. Whether it be on the plane or at the very end at the danger room, I thought was pretty good too.
Well, I think one of the things I don't think we do know where they end up, because the original X-Men trilogy is it's old canon at this point. To me it's exactly the same setup as Star Trek the original series versus the J.J. Abrams Star Trek universe. Like, every single part of it has been reset. So like, those events may happen, but they're not going to happen the same way. So like all of that's out of continuity. So I mean, that's why I liked Mystique's journey in this movie, that like because she's famous. People know who she is, and they either fear her or love her.
Yeah.
And that's a very different take. I know it set off a lot of comic book fans because they don't like her being so out in the public eye, but I think her journey in terms of, I don't want to be somebody's idol. It was very unique to the movies. It's not a comic book type thing for that character, but it worked for what they had built to this point.
Yeah, and do you think it's also because of Jennifer Lawrence as an actress? Because just her in the last 5 to 10 years, when these movies came out, she has blown up in the Hollywood eyes. So I think that's also because they have such a star power that they're going to write more just for her character too, which also affects just the canon of the regular X-Men stories.
Yeah, but like what you said, that's pure, like that's a dichotomy between, she doesn't want to be a false idol, she doesn't want to be considered a hero, and yet you have this god Apocalypse who takes on the moniker of, I'm going to be a god. I am going to be a god in this planet, whether you like it or not.
I mean, that's an interesting counterpoint between the two characters. But again, it's just like, for me, Apocalypse, I'm just like, Demetri, maybe you can clear it up for me. But like, what does he want? Like, what is his goal from the beginning to the end of this movie? Like, what did he want to accomplish?
He wants to be worshipped. He wants complete.
Did he? Because he seems to be
and,
wiping everybody out. So it's not
no,
like
he wasn't. His whole goal was the strongest will survive, and they will be my follower. He goes, I'm gonna wipe out the strongest are gonna survive, and those who survive, it's like it's like early Testament kind of wrath of God. I'm gonna like get rid of everybody. Those who survive, that's where I'm starting from.
I think
so. I gotta level everything. And then,
let me ask you guys this: is the problem, because I'm on board with that argument, but is the problem that we're only restricted to Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse? And I know obviously it comes from the comics and so forth. However, it just felt for this movie, it felt like an arbitrary number versus like, hey, whoever wants to join me and be of strength and is worthy, by all means, come join.
And I think, I think it's that too, because he had four horsemen who virtually did nothing, but you got to remember Magneto, who was like the biggest villain for the longest time. That was his whole philosophy, like join the Brotherhood. It's like join anyone at any number can join. So like his thing was gather anyone who wants to be on his side. Where I think that what keeps him apart from Apocalypse is like he only had four, and that was it.
Yeah, and for me, like outside of that, his life in Poland and how that got taken away from him, I think the question that should be asked is, would he have, like, had he still had that life? I mean, he had tried to do what Charles had been telling him to do all along. He's going to try to have a normal life and be loved. He had a kid. He loses all of that. So for me, it made that decision for him, when he comes across Apocalypse, and Apocalypse can truly see the type of power that he has. For me, it made it an easy decision for Magneto to go, he was in such despair, and he's like, you know what? I try to be good. This is what I have to be.
Well, it's like it goes. I mean, it's a Star Wars-esque type of thing. No, it is. Where like the dark side is that much more powerful because again, when he felt pain, he comes to fruition with his full ability. Whereas if he, as Charles said, like there's a happier side to you can control it that way. Obviously, a differing philosophy. Like, he wasn't as strong as even though he could be. There's a block in him to do that out of happiness. Zach, any thoughts on 4 as an arbitrary number?
I mean, it's a cool factoid with the past, but it was just like one more thing that's I didn't grasp why Apocalypse was doing any part of what he was doing. Like, he was gathering these people, but he didn't seem like he was gathering any of them for a specific purpose. He's just like, come fight with me for X. Like, if they had harped more on the idea of I am going to protect this world and make it a better world, I would have been on board. But just him seeking out worshipers for the sake of having worshipers isn't enough for me. It wasn't enough to drive it home. So like, it would have been more interesting if he was going after masses instead of just like, I have 4 soldiers and now I'm going to attack the biggest person. I guess he saw the way Charles as a way to gain those followers by force, but it was just like, it wasn't enough motivation for him to make it interesting.
I agree. If there was a more clear objective and motivation for that, it would have made 4 like, okay, these are the reason why.
Well, there are four horsemen of the apocalypse.
No, we know that.
This is a very biblical reference.
But that's a cool factoid. But for this character, he came up with the 4 horsemen. So why did he pick 4?
Mm-hmm.
I think an easy fix, right? If you guys go with this, I think a fun thing would have been only 4 would have sided with him. Like, if he actually tried to recruit rather than, like, he just shows up and boom, everyone, these 4 people are on his side. If he actually tried to actively recruit, I think that would have been cool, and he only walked away with 4. That, to me, could have worked, and that's why then the ability to actually control free will would have been that much more powerful of, like, I need Charles for this, and that's how I gain worshipers.
But why did...
I don't know.
We're getting into a religious philosophical... Why does God need archangels. I mean, I say that he picks his 4 horsemen here because these are more or less going to be his guardsmen, his messengers. These are the people who are like, these are his pitch people. These are the people he's sending out. He's letting them do the work eventually, and which they do because it's Magneto who's like tearing up the ground and such. So that's, they're his, in a sense, minions. They're the strongest of who he believes are the strongest of his crew. So to me, it makes that biblical sense. I get that. And when we start talking Easter eggs, I'm going to bring up an Easter egg that was in there that mirrors what was happening in this in a much smaller
Fair enough.
media.
So why don't we talk about let's talk about Magneto, because a lot of people's problem is that that at the end, he does this all this destruction, and then he's sort of let back in to society, and it's almost like forgotten. Now, in terms of what Simon Kinberg, the writer and producer, he says, we try to keep it, the things that Magneto was destroying felt almost like monuments or rooftops of buildings rather than a building toppling over and people dying. It's one of the things that Bryan's very sensitive to. I may be less sensitive to it. Actually, I'm sort of more of a genre geek where I'm okay with cities being destroyed. Bryan's very sensitive to collateral damage. If you go back and watch the movie, it's things like bridges ripping apart and cars floating in the air, but you don't see cars dive bombing into the water, shipping containers flying through the air, but they don't smash into any bodies. So what do you guys kind of think about that?
I think that's interesting because I think that maybe kind of shows a little bit of character growth on Magneto's, and he's not out to hurt people for the sake of hurting people. He's just out to destroy the world because he's angry and he's not happy with it. But the fact he's not like actively hurting others because he himself was hurt by others, I think that shows that maybe he's not as evil or as bad as a character as we thought he was.
Look, he is, and Singer talks about him a lot. He is a super villain, so to speak, Magneto. I like within these early, I like what they've done is that, and even in some of the X-Men movies like X-Men 1 and X-Men 2, there's at least that little spark of him. Like Charles always keeps on trying to say, there is good in you, Eric. I know that a lot of bad has happened. You have every right to be angry. And I think the way Fassbender plays him as well, I think is great because you do get that. He's being torn apart. Like, it's almost like, Luke Skywalker. Do I go to the dark side? What am I doing? He goes, I know that I try. But at the end of the day, I'm really best at this. And this is what works for me because I can't deal with people who are always going to fear me. And I just like that there's that inner struggle with him throughout, and it's especially with these last 3 movies, and I think Fassbender's been great. Now, whether or not he meant to hurt anybody, I was watching this movie going, Jesus, there's a hell of a lot of destruction going on. Like, people, even if their cars are going up, well, the law of gravity says they're eventually going to have to come down. And I'm just like, I read that article, I found that article that Kinberg had said, and I'm like, I wasn't totally buying into it because, we didn't see people dying, but there was a lot of destruction. I don't know how it didn't.
It sounds like they took the way people were reacting to Man of Steel, where it's like so many people died. It's like, well, Magneto is a villain. Like people dying is part of destroying a city, and it's part of if you're gonna raise the stakes in a movie to a point where a god is ripping apart places and destroying the earth, then people are gonna die. To me, it it's the difference of this versus the first Avengers movie when New York was being attacked. There were a lot of people that were clearly dying in that city, not massive scales, but people were gonna get hurt, and it felt like they were going to. The way that it was shot, either from ground level, seeing rubble coming at you, or just when the creatures were crashing into buildings. It felt scary, it felt dangerous, but we weren't seeing anybody running or scared on the ground. It looked almost like the cities had been abandoned, and that just removed all of the stakes from the scene. And so if Magneto was trying to and the other side of Magneto was actively trying not to hurt people. Why? He had gone so far as to kill that like group of police in Poland, and now he's siding with a guy who's trying to destroy the world. So why is he holding back if he's going that direction? He needs to go fully that direction. If he's gonna go that way, go all the way. Make him just want to just kill everybody or kill nobody. It has to be one or the other.
Well, then, I mean, did you guys buy that turn then at the end when again he goes against Apocalypse, and then they kind of let him back into the group, and he, in a way, gets the credit for saving all of humanity?
Seems like he should have gotten some kind of like reprimand or punishment. Like, he did hurt a lot of people. Like, changing your mind and seeing like, well, that was not a good thing to do doesn't really take away from the fact that people died.
Yeah, I mean, I get that too. I kind of believed it only because at the beginning of the film we saw him as a good guy, so we know he has it in him that he has a better side.
Yeah.
So the fact that he went back, he started off good, then went evil again, and then went back to good, I believe that.
But even so, well, sorry to cut you off, Demetri.
Not at all.
I mean, I agree that he is now good, or like for whatever amount of time. But to Zach's point, yeah, you destroyed cities.
Yeah, he destroyed cities.
So like like it's not like I can just kill a bunch of people or rob a bank and then be like, you know what, I'm good again, guys. So we're cool, right?
That was wrong.
Like, doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't. But for his character in this film, I accepted the fact that they accepted him back.
Yeah, I mean, he ultimately, again, that's the inner turmoil that I think that this character, as portrayed by Fassbender, you know, again, it was very important, too, that they show going back to Auschwitz. And I think something just clicked in his head, seeing that this false prophet, this false god, like, he's doing what the Germans did to me to put me in my position, and I have this power. No, it's not out of fear. He's just looking to get rid of people, to have people worship him, not unlike Hitler was trying to do. And I think that turn with him, you know, maybe it happened like a little, like he said, no, I didn't betray you. I betrayed them. And I like that line. It says a lot about his character. And yeah, yes, he was, whether we can debate whether or not he killed people according to what Simon Kinberg had said. But yeah, having him, remember, he doesn't stay with the X-Men. He's not in any kind of costume at the end. He's in a suit, and he leaves the house. He goes, okay, Charles. He goes, I think he still has a lot more soul searching going on with him, hence him leaving the castle.
But that's exactly it. I think I would have preferred if he had stayed at the house. Like, if it wasn't his like actions that I questioned. Like, I think that Magneto coming back to the side of good absolutely makes sense, and that fits with his arc in the story, and the way he started and the way he finished it works. But it was how everybody else reacted to him. It's like, if I could see not letting him go, if it's going to be like, okay, we're not going to like put you in a prison again because we know you're just going to break out, but like, you're going to stay here and teach students about what the mistakes that you've made so that they cannot make the same mistakes again. Like, something where he's going to actively be doing better for the world. Because I can't see Charles just saying, like, just shrugging off all of his actions at the end of this movie. He did a lot of bad stuff, and this is a guy who's repeatedly done bad things. This is not well, you made one mistake because of the entrancement of Apocalypse. This is a guy who is done wrong many times throughout his life, and is clearly, if you let him go, gonna do it again. And Charles letting him go that's a weakness on the part of Charles's character. That's
always been in a sense, his belief in Magneto and Eric has been, like, you know, that they were good friends. And I really do believe that, like, him leaving the house for the gifted, to me it made sense. Because he's still struggling with who he is, and he needs to go find that on his own. Charles is a person, he understands Eric, and he does believe in his good. And again, not forgiving. Yes, this guy dropped the stadium on the White House, so in what he was doing with Apocalypse, yeah, not very nice stuff. I don't fully believe that Xavier thinks, this could happen again. I just think that Xavier's belief whether you find it weak or a mistake, I just feel that he believes that Eric has to find himself on his own. And knowing who Charles is, he'll always know where he is unless he puts that helmet on. But he'll be able to hopefully go and help his friend if need be. So,
fair enough. Speaking of tone, I wanted to let's talk about one of the best scenes, at least for me, in the entire movie, the Quicksilver scene.
yeah.
Yes. That was awesome.
But before we actually dissect that scene, just real quick, what do you some people are saying that the weight of that was just misplaced because then comes the death of Havoc, and it you go from like the ultra euphoric scene to
We
to
lost
ultimate
someone.
sadness, and then therefore the death of Havoc doesn't have the weight that it should.
It worked for me. I mean, that's what happens sometimes. Like he gets caught up. Quicksilver is caught up in the fun of and the triumph of saving all the people that he did manage to save, and he couldn't save one of them. And it's only after he has to come down from what he went through that that comes out. That didn't bother me at all. I didn't even think about it as a bad moment. It hurts for Scott.
Yeah, and I felt the way that they had played it out too, that Havoc was so close to it, even with Quicksilver's speed. I mean, he was at literally ground zero, and when he was done, he was like, "Yeah, I got everybody out," because I didn't see anybody else. I think Havoc had already come to his end at that point. Great scene though. I mean, how do you top what they did in Days of Futures Past, which that scene was amazing. They had a great music bed for it, and it was something that, as an audience, we'd never seen before. It was funny. It was, and it just set this whole thing up. And you go, okay, am I going to see this again, just repurposed? Well, yeah, but it was even better, what they did.
Mm-hmm.
It was amazing, and I love the kid who plays Quicksilver. Evan Peters. He's fantastic. The kid, he's funny, and he's, I'm glad he's quote unquote part of the team. I was just wondering, and I don't know exactly how it is in the comics, but why are you not saying, "I'm your son"? I'm your son.
A lot of people are saying that.
Or it's because if Magneto or Eric if you're going to quote unquote melt his heart, it would be because he still has a son. He has not just X-Men family, he has family.
Yeah, that seemed like a needless takeaway. Like, why would you not? It just it was perfectly set up in terms of the script and the story. It was perfectly for the characters. It was this is the time where you go and go talk to your dad, and everyone else around you, Mystique knows, the professor probably knows. I imagine Jean Grey knows.
Yeah.
Why is Magneto the only one who doesn't get to know?
Yeah, it was sort of why aren't you playing that card?
Well, especially because, Zach's right. It was set up, I like Quicksilver with his line, as fast as I am, I'm never quick enough. And so, this is the one moment where you get to actually overturn that, and all you have to do is just scream out, "Hey, dude, I'm your son." That's it. Yeah. And then you are, because God forbid now, as life continues, that you were too late and you didn't say anything. Yeah,
and again, they to Zach's point too, they threw up a big beach ball for it. Mystique is man, you got Eric, stop. You gotta stop. You have family, and right next to him was literal family, and he's like, "Well, what are you here for?" And he's like, "Well, I'm here for family." And I'm like, or maybe, Dad?
I'm here because of that.
Yeah, I'm your son. I'm here for real family. You're my dad.
Maybe that's something we'll see in the future.
Maybe. I don't know. In the comics, do they ever address that, Zach?
With
him knowing that he's the son.
Yeah.
Yeah, he knows. It's different in different continuities.
Sure.
Fair enough. So let's talk specifics about that scene, because both of you actually did quite a bit of research on that. And, in terms of most filming days, they say Evan Peters was on set for the longest amount of time out of any of the actors.
Yeah. Just for this one scene.
There was so much that went involved, but it was really cool because they had real time explosions, but they used the phantom camera at 90 miles per hour through the explosions that filmed at like 3,100 frames per second.
Can you imagine something
So
that goes...
essentially, they could freeze time
Could you imagine a camera that goes 3,000 frames
per
I saw it.
second.
Yeah.
I saw it.
Per
It's
second.
like, that's amazing.
Yeah,
Amazing.
I mean, just like the mechanics of it is pretty cool. And so, yeah, they moved that, and then like a bunch of the kids were on actual harnesses and like tilted at different angles through the air.
Out
And
of curiosity, I should have probably looked in, but is that faster or slower than what Inception did with the car off the bridge?
ooh,
That's a good trivia.
we'll have to
That's
question.
a really
figure
good.
that out.
I'd have to research. Yeah,
Yeah.
what Nolan used.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it could be
'Cause
actually
that's-
more than the truck.
Yeah, could be. I mean, again, it's just like where technology has come today. And again, how do you
Leaps
up
and
that
bounds.
ante? How do you up that ante from Days of Futures
You know the
Past?
sad part is, I watched that scene. It's not as good from Days of Future Past. It just doesn't
Yeah,
compare.
it's not.
Yeah,
It just got
But-
completely trumped.
but it got trumped. But it's virtually that we're seeing they're just redoing something, but they're redoing it in a bigger form. It's what you hope to get in a sequel. I'm not going to discount the Days of Futures Past scene because again, the comedic elements in that are great. It just that was the setup for a major punchline. I don't know how they utilize Quicksilver going forward and whether we'll get something even bigger. But
Well,
man,
I thought they
such a
did a good
great
job. You know, in terms of one of the things that I thought worked really well in terms of Apocalypse was the notion that all of a sudden here's Quicksilver and he's beating the crap out of him, and then it's like, give me a minute, I'm gonna handle this, and then he focuses, okay, I got you, and done. Mm-hmm. You know, I liked that aspect of it. I thought that worked really well.
And it was funny while I was going, I was like, how is a god getting beaten? Like
Yeah.
he's supposed to be a god. Like I know Quicksilver's fast, but again, the comedic elements of that were the punches to the face and like Apocalypse's face going to, and that was a really super scene. It was great up until he got caught.
Well, it worked. I mean, that was the thing. At least they are using the characters' powers and not just like sidelining them where you're like, why isn't Quicksilver just running in and punching the crap out of him because he has that ability? But like Apocalypse has a lot of powers. Speed is not one of them. So Quicksilver can move faster so that he can hit him. But once he's grabbed, there's nothing he can do. So like at least in that instance, they used the powers the way that it made sense. There were some other instances we can talk about later that I'm just like, wait, that's not how that works.
And I think that quick moment with Quicksilver beating up Apocalypse, it showed the audience that Apocalypse can be defeated. It gave that sense of, hey, if someone can actually hurt him, then it is possible he can be destroyed.
Or at least he's like, you can hit him at least. Like,
Yeah.
so now you can do more if you get to him.
Mm-hmm.
He's not actually a god.
Yeah.
I agree with you guys, but I also think it's one of those, it's one of those great movie moments where you're like, what do I got to do to beat this guy? It's like, I've tried this, I've tried that. It's
We're throwing everything up at him. Yeah.
And towards the end, you got Magneto, you got Cyclops, you got everything you could throw at him, and just nothing's working.
Yep.
So I like that aspect of it. What character do you guys want to talk about next?
Can we just talk Quicksilver for just 1 second?
Yeah.
So, in Zach, because I know your knowledge within the Marvel universe is so fantastic. But my thing with Quicksilver is, so we have the Quicksilver in this X-Men series, right? And then it is Quicksilver in the Avengers?
Yes.
Okay.
There was a basically Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, because they're siblings, children of Magneto, but very early in their existence they joined the Avengers. So they've been mainstays in both the X-Men books and in the Avengers books for years. So there was a big debate between the two studios before Avengers 2 and before Days of Future Past of who had the rights to the characters, since they weren't like specific. I think it's the deal didn't specifically lay out like characters that they own, just properties. So they basically had to have arbitration, and they ended up deciding both companies have the rights to use the characters. I think there was sort of a this is just my own theory, but I think there was sort of like a handshake agreement of like, all right, you focus on Quicksilver, we'll focus on Scarlet Witch, and like that way it doesn't feel like there's just two versions running around, because like Disney, spoilers for Avengers 2, killed off Quicksilver right away. And Scarlet Witch, they've like made reference to her being nearby. Like they've like called out your sister, but we haven't seen her anywhere on screen.
Right. And I guess that's what I'm getting at, because if Marvel eventually gets what Marvel wants, which is complete cross-pollination and such, we have one universe where Quicksilver is dead, and this universe where Quicksilver is not dead. And I get that this is 1984, but he was a different Quicksilver. I mean, like, not even just from an actor perspective, like he had an accent. I mean,
yeah. Well, I mean, if they ever do an X-Men Avengers crossover at this point, like it won't be a clean like, oh well, these are all like all the X-Men movies are canon with the Marvel movies. It's just like with Spider-Man, they reset Spider-Man's canon and like mythos, so that like the Tom Holland version is completely new. Like, yes, there's going to be similarities to the Tobey Maguire stories, to the Andrew Garfield stories, but those are not the MCU Spider-Man. The only way that you're going to see this cast of X-Men in an MCU movie is if they do something like the theory that people have thrown out is something like a Secret Wars, where it's more of a two universes crashing together, and then it's not about like these are two different Earths. This Earth never had the Avengers. This Earth never had the X-Men, and so like you might have two Quicksilvers next to two Scarlet Witches next to each other who are just like different versions of the same person. If we ever get to that, which people have bandied it about, including the producers on both sides. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. No, I'm already scratching my head by what you said. Not that you didn't do it eloquently, but I'm just like, you had two people playing Quicksilver. This guy in X-Men is great, but what we also know in another Marvel franchise, Quicksilver's dead, and it to me it just was a little confusion. But I like this guy. I like this kid.
Fair enough. Let's talk Nightcrawler. This is his sort of second iteration. Also did X2, obviously. I like the way they introduced him, right? Because it's you get Angel and you get him sort of fighting. It's very similar to how we're introduced to Hugh Jackman. Yeah. Except this time it's known that they are mutants, and obviously that works really well. But yeah, I thought he brought a lot of good humor to this overall.
I liked him because, even in the comic animation, X-Men and whatnot, Nightcrawler was always somewhat of that comic relief, the fun one who's just around but still doesn't know everything, but he's just there. I liked this version because Nightcrawler is just a cool character to follow and to watch on screen in whatever form you're watching it. I like this version, especially with having Cody Smith-McPhee. I think he's a very talented actor if you've seen his other films and stuff, and I like that he felt fresh and young for a iconic X-Men character.
Yeah, I liked the kid who played him as well. One thing as I was watching this movie, I kept on thinking I liked who they cast, because in 20 plus years time, when we get to say the first X-Men movie, I could see them becoming like James Monsters playing Scott. I could see her morphing into what we know as the Femke Janssen character. I can see him as growing as Nightcrawler, being what Alan Cummings was. Like, I thought they did I was thinking about that a lot, and I liked the way this kid portrayed him. And it was very, he had his sense of humor. Obviously, he was still his religious thing. I love that going into it. His naivete about a lot of things in the world, like not knowing what a mall is. Like, that was very funny. I vote we go to the mall. And I liked how they played him, and I liked his costume and character design, and his tail too. I loved, which was had as many moves as he did and worked almost independently of him. And yeah, he was. I thought they did a really good job of introducing that character into this into the fold.
the fight sequences with him were also just incredible. Like
Yeah.
the bamfing everywhere and like the way they did it with him. The fight of him versus Angel. A lot of people have complaints about the punk rock version of Angel, and it is a very different take on the character than we've seen in the books and even in the original set of movies. I don't mind that it's so different. I would love to get more backstory on him, but Nightcrawler, just like the way that the two of them fought, where it's just like bamf, 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 like it felt right. It was the right way to have that character move and fight, and like the idea that like he can like take other people with him when he bamfs. And it's by the way, for anyone who thinks I'm just using a weird word a lot, in the books, whenever he teleports, it always says bamf.
Bam.
Like BAMF, and it's just that's how people refer to his abilities. He's bamfing. And it was well done. It was fun, and it was fun to watch. It was cool.
And it's not that he fights so much as he tries to like run away, and the guy's like saying, "Dude, you gotta fight," and he's like, well, I can do this. This is easier for me to do, and I don't want to fight. Like, why? That was a great scene. That cage match, and all the places that they had him go. Yeah,
and they showed the blob there in the like
Yeah.
that's more of an Easter egg bit for later, but like the blob comes out, just like throwing characters in there. It's just a cool touch.
Yeah.
But I think that it like for Angel, it made sense to have him there in the punk rock style, because even if he did grow up as like Warren Worthington, like super rich, if he had gotten stuck in this situation, like he would have to go a little bit more punk rock, because he's like, no, if I don't fight, if I'm not badass like 80s style with my perm, they're gonna shoot me. So it's like wrestling. He had to become a fan favorite in order to stay alive, and that's what he's saying to Nightcrawler.
Yeah.
And what do you, in terms of Nightcrawler, what do you think about the differentiation where he's no longer Mystique's son? Or, I mean, I don't think there's any hint of that, right?
The timeline. I mean, there's a lot of timeline issues in this movie. If you actually stop and think about the years, it's like, well, if Mystique had been there in the 60s, that's the age that she was during the Cuban Missile Crisis from First Class, and then you have Nightcrawler at the age Kurt's the age that he is now, that timeline adds up, but not when Mystique didn't age over the last 20 years.
Right.
This is true.
As no one did.
Right.
Yeah, maybe 1 year,
Maybe.
It's that beast. He's got his injections.
Yes.
All mutants get magic anti-aging injections. It's a sub power in the X gene.
Absolutely.
I
You
understand.
don't age at all.
I understand they get it from Keels. That's what I've heard.
Let's talk about one of the biggest fan services of the entire thing, Wolverine.
Yes.
Yeah.
It made sense because they went to Alkali Lake. I was like, okay, he has to be here if the whole Weapons X program is there. And then it was funny when I was actually watching it in real time. There was maybe 20 seconds before he appeared. I was like, we still haven't seen Wolverine yet. And then here, literally, he shows up within that minute of me thinking that. I was like, oh, yep, there he is. So it was very expected.
But the continuity that this breaks, like from Days of Future Past, like if you remember, at the end of Days of Future Past, the last thing we saw, as they set it up to be super important, like this is gonna lead us into the next movie and where we are, is that Mystique has taken over for Stryker. Like, she has become Stryker and has captured Wolverine. So they just completely ignored that ever happened. This movie pretended that scene did not exist because there's no results from it.
Yeah.
Wolverine is still captured, Stryker's still in charge, and now he's Weapon X.
Yeah, I know. It rewrote a lot of the Wolverine story of him at the Alkali Lake. It was like, because we even saw, the introduction into the X2 film when we saw him exit, Alkali Lake when waking up from the program. So, like, this film and this particular scene completely rewrote over that canon as well.
Yeah, but again, just because, okay, so the way that Days of Future Past ends, we know that Raven, or Mystique, Raven, she didn't stay on as Stryker. We know that because that obviously didn't happen because she's off saving mutants. So the gap between Days of Futures Past and this movie, we don't know. Stryker obviously still exists because he's in this movie as well. And so, like, to me, it's just one of those things that they'll either put in like novel form, like to fill in the gap to say, how did Hugh Jackman, how did Wolverine get captured by? Eventually, it seems that Stryker captures Wolverine and brings him to Alkali Lake.
But yeah, well, we saw that. We saw Wolverine get captured at the end of Days of Future Past. So It's like, but like it either they just couldn't figure out what to do with like Mystique being like having control over Wolverine at that point, or they just absolutely forgot that it happened. Like, to me, it's not an excuse that, like, oh, well, it happened sometime in the time between movies. Like, no, something that significant that you're going to make it one of the final beats of the last movie, like, that's important. And either pay it off or, explain it, pay it off or explain it away, or it should not have been in Days of Future Past. They just, like, it was a blatant, just, like, getting your mythos wrong. And it's another one of the things that just like this movie had against it is just like they weren't somebody in the process wasn't paying attention.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it is very unfortunate that again it did go that way and then it wasn't addressed in one way, shape, or form. I agree.
Well, one of the original iterations though, they were going to have him show up and he was going to be a quote unquote drill sergeant for the younglings, let's call them. And, they scrapped that idea because they felt that Mystique or Jennifer's role should be, like, that would step on her character arc and her role, which I completely agree. I mean, I do like how that Mystique character, the Raven character, becomes into her own. So, they wanted Wolverine in this in one way, shape, or form. I think the lesser of two evils. I mean... from when you start writing this, I'm not entirely... Okay, so they had the great ending at Days of Futures Past, but I don't think they were thinking so far ahead. They may have had plot outlines, but I think incorporating Wolverine, obviously, that wasn't the main through line that they wanted to do. So coming up and putting them back in... when the kids get abducted, they get abducted to Alkali Lake. It just makes sense because we know through the origin of what we've seen thus far of where Wolverine ends up. So, yes, I understand. You think very much about it. Doesn't make too much sense, but I don't know. Makes more sense than him being a drill sergeant, I think.
The whole scene was a little just, like, gratuitous of, like, we need to have Wolverine in this movie, even though we don't need him for the story.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll just throw him in. By the way, for people who are curious, this is what he looked like, what Weapon X Wolverine looks like in the comics. A lot bigger headgear.
Well, it was the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty funny to see, was the headgear. It did make me laugh a little bit. All right, let's talk about Psylocke. But before, let me tell you, let's take a quick break, and I'm going to tell you about a great science fiction novel, in fact, a trilogy of its own that you guys should check out. Let me give you the premise. Let's start there. What if today was the last normal day of your life? Cassie Sullivan thought she knew what tomorrow would bring, but she was wrong. We were all wrong. The first wave took our power, killing 500,000 people. The second wave put that number to shame with tsunamis that destroyed everyone within 100 miles of the ocean. Goodbye, coastal cities. And then the third wave came, and only the unlucky remained. Survivors of a virus that left only 3% of the world still standing. The fourth wave, others became us, inhuman beings hiding behind human faces. And then at the dawn of the fifth wave, we had to choose: give up or get up and fight. But that was only the beginning. In the last days of Earth's remaining survivors, they will need to decide what's more important, saving ourselves or saving what makes us humans. Rick Yancey's #1 New York Times bestselling novel, The Fifth Wave, introduces us to a group of young people struggling to survive in the aftermath of a catastrophic alien invasion. Its sequels, The Infinite Sea, and now the newly released The Last Star, follow them through a series of battles and betrayals as they fight the ultimate war between life and death, hope and despair, love and hate. Entertainment Weekly calls the series remarkable, not to be missed under any circumstances, and urges fans to just read it. USA Today hails this as a modern sci-fi masterpiece, and the best-selling author of The Passage, John Cronin, raves in his New York Times book review, calling The Fifth Wave wildly entertaining. The highly anticipated finale is here and will leave readers stunned. That is The Last Star. And where can you get it? Well, at fifthwavebooks.com. That's fifthwavebooks.com. So if you're a fan of this, the X-Men, you will be a fan of this.
Is fifthwavebooks.com the only place, or could I go to my Barnes and Noble
That's the easiest
to get it
place.
from my Nook?
It's the easiest place
Kindle?
to get it all, baby. Just go there.
They have digital download for that?
Get
Last
in there.
Star.
Get in there. It's the easiest place. That way, the less thinking you have to do, the better. Especially for Demetri.
Is there a weapon? Yeah, you're right.
All right. So Psylocke, Olivia Munn, in a way, almost like you could consider she bullied her way into this because of her love of the X-Men. And Simon Kinberg, he says that he enjoyed having Olivia as part of the cast because of her knowledge, and she was able to really help with story, or so he says.
It's cool. I mean, I like Olivia Munn. She's great in the newsroom, and I think she's a really talented actress and whatnot. It was cool to see her. I think this is one of the characters that should have been developed more, because she had one maybe cool moment when she flipped into the scene and tried to be badass, but I'm like, was that it? And I felt she was completely underutilized, and especially for being one of the Four Horsemen, she could have done a lot more.
I think so too. I think she ended up being in a lot of cinematography, frames, as just kind of in the background, either her face or her lower body, obviously because she's a good-looking woman. That right. I think that's how she was most utilized in the entire movie.
I mean, yeah, she looked good on screen, but that was about it. She didn't talk. We weren't given any backstory on her character, any of her character's motivation, or why she joins Apocalypse, other than the fact that he respects her as someone who's powerful.
Yeah,
I don't know. Psylocke's a character I'm not super familiar with from the books. It's just there's a ton of X-Men. I haven't read a ton of her stories, and I left with about as much information about what she could do, or what she could be going for, as I did when I started the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to me, she was badass. At the beginning, as being that mutant traitor. I forget his name. That she's supposed to be that person's bodyguard.
What is it?
Caliban.
That's it,
Wasn't
right?
it Caliban? The movie's not called Psylocke. It's X-Men. She's not part of this team. I mean, I could see her eventually siding on Magneto's side. She, from what I understand, her costume was the most closest what resembles the costume in the books than any other costume within the X-Men movies. And she had that great fight at the end. I mean, I thought, she was great. I didn't need any character development from that character.
But
I didn't need that.
Then why bother to have her at all? I mean, maybe I'm spoiled from movies like Avengers and Civil War, but those movies have shown that you can have a massive cast and still give every single character an arc and give them a reason to be there. Because there's no if you're just putting in characters to put them there, it's a waste. It's a waste of screen time.
You're talking about a series that takes 5 years to get to where they are, and you get to, in each character had their own movie. When I'm getting these Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, outside of Magneto, to me they're just strong mutants. I don't need much information on Psylocke.
But Storm is a perfect example of she had limited amount of screen time, but they used the screen time that they gave her to give her a clear motivation and an arc. She was somebody who had no power in her life because she was a homeless outcast, because she was a mutant, and she looked up to Mystique as somebody who she could aspire to be. And then she met Apocalypse, somebody that might be able to give her that ability to be that bigger person. And then she learns as she goes, as she sees Apocalypse attacking Mystique, this isn't the thing that I thought it was. And she grows from that. But we didn't get any kind of even hint of like what Psylocke wanted.
I'm just going to bring this back up again. X-Men. Storm is an X-Men character that we've known since the first X-Men movie.
But it's irrelevant to what we got from her. What Halle Berry did in the future didn't affect the way that we saw her in this movie. It was
she was also in Days of Futures Past and
But what I'm saying is, like, that
movie.
character just in this movie, in a vacuum, this movie alone, the character of Storm had a good arc that I could follow, and I could get invested in this take on the character.
Sure.
And it's not about the characters that had movies to build them up. Again, just to use Civil War as an analogy, as another big cast superhero movie, Spider-Man. Like, again, it's not about your attachment to the character before, but we met him, we instantly knew what that character was like, what he was going to do, his dynamic in the team that he was put in, and on the people he was fighting against. He fit, and we knew what he was going to do and why he was there. Psylocke was just thrown in to be somebody who could, like, throw around other characters.
Yes, you're right. I mean,
And
Psylocke is Spider-Man?
And that's well, no, but like they introduced. I only use Spider-Man because they introduced him in that movie. He didn't have other setup. And look, Psylocke is a character that we're not at all familiar with. So
Right.
she needs that setup even more. Otherwise, it's just bad filmmaking from a writing standpoint, from a directing standpoint. If you're not going to give us some reason to connect with this character, don't put her in.
Yeah, I disagree. Because to me, I didn't care. She was there. She was badass.
Exactly,
she did
you
what she
didn't
was
care.
supposed to do.
You should care. You should care about every character.
Why should I
should
care
care.
about Psylocke? Why? I
Exactly.
just don't get it.
That's my point. Why should you care? And if
We
you
didn't.
don't, then why should you put her? Why would the filmmakers put her in this movie if they don't want you to care?
Okay. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but your comparisons, you're talking about Spider-Man and Psylocke. I mean, you're making references like you're talking about a C character at best who's in this movie who has a function to be a Four Horseman. I don't care about her background at this point. She's a
Better
mutant.
analogy. Maria Hill in the Avengers. Maria Hill, D-list level character. You don't know who Maria Hill is if you've never seen or read a comic book, but that character has a very clear arc from the beginning to the end of that movie about whether or not they should trust the Avengers and utilize them, what she should do, whether she should trust Nick Fury versus the board of shadowy figures, as I call them. Like, that character has very few scenes, but a lot to do. Phil Coulson has a lot to do, a lot of growth. There's no reason that you have to settle on giving a small character nothing to do. And Olivia Munn is such a brilliant actress. It was a waste.
Brilliant?
Have you watched The Newsroom? She's
Yes.
a
She's
fantastic
fantastic in
actress.
The Newsroom.
She has great
She's
ability.
one of my favorite characters in the newsroom, and that's why I was very upset that they didn't utilize her talents and ability in this film, because I think, to add to this point, like Angel, we even got a little bit of a backstory with him. Like, he was a fighter and he got wounded, and then Apocalypse gave him better wings. So, like, even from that small little bit of a storyline for him, I can understand how Angel got onto Apocalypse side. But again, with Psylocke, still didn't understand why she joined them. Nope. So and so like we understood Storm, we understood Angel, we understood Magneto, but we didn't understand Psylocke.
Yeah, I thought she just sided with Apocalypse because, hey, he's the big dude in town. I'm gonna follow him. He's gonna take me. He's gonna enhance my powers better than they are already. I didn't need a whole. This wasn't a Psylocke movie. She was just one of these Four Horsemen. Even Angel, like, again, what do I know about him? I know nothing about him really, and I didn't need to. I didn't need to know anything about those C characters that came into this movie that really didn't have much impact on. I wanted to focus on Apocalypse if we're talking about the villains, and I wanted to focus on Eric and what his decision ultimately was going to, do. These other people, they were going to be in big fights, and that was a great fight scene at the end where Psylocke was really used with that sword, and I love that fight scene at the end. But
that's
at the end of the day, she walks away, and she'll end up being in another movie or whatever they decide to do with that character.
Yeah, but that's the thing is, like, if they didn't want to use her character to give her time, then they could have put Cyclops in there as, like, one of the horsemen that he recruits. I'm not saying that that's the right move, but, like, you're developing that character, so use that screen time. Like, you already got a 2-hour, 20-minute movie, then you don't have enough time to spare for all your characters, so you can lose a few. You don't have to have all of these people in there.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. Any other characters you guys want to talk about before we head into Easter eggs and then kind of
Well, why don't we
production?
do we want to talk a little bit about character design, or do we want to talk? I mean, did we talk about Raven Mystique? And Jennifer, I mean, there's another. I mean, you know, we talked big A-list actress and.
Yeah, sure. Let's do it. I mean, ultimately, we're not going to get in depth as with everything that we can. Just FYI, you know, for fans out, if you know, otherwise we'd be here for 20 hours. But let's talk Mystique.
You know, and again, what I was saying earlier too, I think they gave more to Mystique or Raven Mystique in this movie than they had, even more so in the last two movies. And I really think that this character's grown into that leadership role. My only question, as I was just while I was watching the movie, you know, has Jennifer Lawrence come to the point? Do you think she's so in tune with Katniss? I mean, it was very, like, when she was taking charge, I was thinking, she's just doing Katniss. Like, is she coming to a point where, you know, I know she's going to be in this big science fiction movie coming up. I don't want to say anything bad as an actress, but did she sort of kind of phone this performance in?
There's literally rankings online that have Jennifer Lawrence as, like, you're just sleepwalking through this entire thing. Unfortunately.
And that's terrible, because I think Jennifer Lawrence is a great actress herself. Like, if you take her out of this sci-fi genre, she's a really strong actress in other ways. And I think again, that goes with the Hollywood. She's become such a big star that because she is so big, they had to build her character because people just want more screen time watching her. So let's give her something, let's give her a story. And again, I think that's where, like, there was a lot of character imbalances because some people got more screen time and some people didn't, who should have. But I think Jennifer Lawrence, she did great for her scenes and her roles. As a viewer, I have a hard time believing that she could step into this leadership role because she is such a conflicted character. And knowing what is to become in the future, if you're going to kind of go canon, we know that she kind of reverts back to her evil misdemeanors and her evil ways, or I shouldn't say evil, but like her more dubious ways. So I had a hard time believing she could be good in a leadership role, knowing that she's going to be bad in the future.
Right.
Yeah, I thought story-wise they did good by her character. I think I said this earlier, but like her path towards being more of a hero, basically because of the events of Days of Future Past, and like that small change in her history set her on this path that we see now in this movie, and that makes sense to me. That works. It's different than what we expected, and I like it. I do agree. Jennifer Lawrence, just like, it's not that anything she did was bad per se. It was just like there was nothing. We know she's capable of so much. Right. From all of her performances, and either the script didn't give her that, or she just didn't add that in herself. So I don't know if it's the script and the directing to blame, or it's her as an actress. It could be either side or both. It's just it wasn't to the top of what she is capable of.
Yeah, I agree. I think her performance was nothing out of her wheelhouse. It's everything we know she's capable of, and she didn't have any scenes that was like, oh, that was Oscar-worthy. You know, I think it was something that was very much her comfort zone, and it was nothing more.
Well, I think there's a difference between, like, I don't think, you know, James McAvoy, you know, in Atonement, that's, you know, that's something different versus Charles Xavier.
I know.
Like, I don't think he's, you know, no offense, I don't think he's necessarily stretching as far as he could as Charles Xavier.
Right.
But I think there's a difference between, again, the way he necessarily did it versus, I think just something, to Zach's point, she's done better,
right,
even with less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's done more with less.
And again, it's not that it hurt the movie, and it was a good story arc for that character, and she's been playing this character for a while. It's been great. I mean, you know.
But talk about Hugh Jackman. How long is it,
well,
about
he's
a
the
guy,
only one that's been in every single
X-Men
X-Men movie.
you talk about like
Talk about consistency.
yeah, but talk about someone who could have phoned it in. I mean, we didn't necessarily get all that much out of it, but
Sure.
We talked about it enough where it regardless, like it made an impact.
Yeah.
And he, if he phoned it in any way, shape, or form, I don't think it could have been the worst thing.
I sort of kind of just got that she was just channeling a little bit of working on Hunger Games. It was just a weird thing. It's like she's a great character, Mystique and Raven, and Jennifer Lawrence is a very talented actress, well beyond her years. I was just wondering, watching this movie, if I was like the only one going.
No, there were plenty of people.
Interesting.
Unfortunately.
Interesting.
Well, I mean, I think she's just well aware, and they even said it in the movie. The third one in the franchise is always the worst.
It's so meta.
That was so just like, I couldn't tell if they were just making a joke at the expense of The Last Stand, or if they were self-aware that like, yeah, this movie's not going to be as good as you hoped.
Yeah, and again, I'll go back to the Star Wars reference that they used. I mean, we can go through this debate day in, day out, and it just goes back. Yes, Return of the Jedi may not be as good as say Empire Strikes Back, the movie previous, but it's not a bad movie.
No, not
It's,
at all.
it's not a bad movie, and that's where I sort of kind of go with like Apocalypse. No, I don't think it's as good as Days of Future Past, but that still doesn't mean it's a bad movie. Days of Future Past really set a high bar, storytelling and such. To me, this is a good movie. We have like a ton to talk about. That scene was very meta. I liked the Return of the Jedi reference. For me, a little least, they had Up the Academy, which is a Mad Magazine movie, their first and only movie released theatrically, that had the Karate Kid Ralph Macchio was in it. The only thing was the times didn't line up, but the mere fact that they put that up on a marquee along with Return of the Jedi was hysterical to me. And it may help answer some of our questions that we had. Remember when we did Nice Guys, we talked 1977 and Star Wars. Well, I stayed for the very end credits to this movie, and apparently they said thank you to Lucas, or allowing permission to use the poster and such for Return of the Jedi. So that may be why they didn't have that in the Nice Guys. I didn't think you needed permission to put that up on a movie marquee, but I found it to be very interesting.
Doesn't Fox have some amount of like, or they did have distribution at one point?
They used to.
Yeah. So it's probably, they probably just had better access since they, at that time,
true.
it was a Fox distributed
It was Fox.
picture.
Yep. So one thing too that I found very interesting is Oscar Isaacs as Apocalypse too.
Yeah.
This could have been a character that he could have played it very well over the top, or almost too subdued. I thought it was fine. What I found the most fascinating was it wasn't motion capture. Like this was this was a ton of makeup and a costume that took over 3.5 hours for him to get into every day. And I was like, well, that's sort of kind of refreshing. That's like, using models instead of CG. And I thought Oscar Isaacs, again, this guy's just like on a roll. I thought he was pretty good. I mean, whether you like the character or not, it's nice to see him where he can play this opposite of a Poe Dameron character, and he's almost
the interesting
unrecognizable.
I mean, I think that's the thing to me. Like, to me, it wasn't Oscar Isaac.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's just he was very much in that way, and he just kind of went with it. And so much so, I think Marisa pulled the information for this in terms of his voice, right? And why they chose to do it in that way. Like, he was very much not a human, therefore not Oscar Isaac.
Yeah, and it's funny, it was always his voice. It was through ADR that they changed his voice.
And they also doubled up on his voice to make him sound even more, have more weight to him. And then I think with just the physical appearance, a lot. When I was watching him, I completely forgot Oscar Isaac was doing this performance, because that's how intimidating, I guess, Apocalypse was physically. Like, he had a strong presence, and I was afraid of him. I would not want to cross Apocalypse. And I think that just goes to, the great makeup and character design, and just how good Oscar Isaacs is as an actor, for me to forget that was him, just to get lost into his performance. I thought he did a great job. And, just for the character development, Apocalypse in the comics, he's known for like having big, physical, threatening stature, and here Oscar Isaacs is a smaller guy, and they had to put him up on 6-inch risers for his character. So I think just the physical transformation, I think, was really well done. Yeah, and I want to further your point regarding his voice, and they doubled up. So they basically, in addition to a standard Sennheiser microphone, they used a bass mic near his right cheek, and to his left cheek, they used a bass drum mic, like a musician's mic, so he could pull vocal tones that would not normally be heard by the human ear. With 3 microphones at his face, Oscar always had to keep his head in the right spot. That's crazy. That's crazy. So I think that's, I just found that to be, in his costuming and what they needed to get through to put him in it, I think. And then it wasn't motion capture. And, you really do have to perform. So yeah, that's great. Well, towards the this is the first time where we kind of get all 4 blue mutants all together. So for that, I forget the exact whatever it was, but towards the end of it, it took 30 costume dressers to put them into basically uniform and camera ready for those shoot dates. Wow. So I mean, again, you have him taking 3 hours. One of the Jennifer Lawrence's big things is she always hated that blue suit. Right. And then you have Beast, you have Nightcrawler. Am I missing anyone blue? Well, no. Let's catch this. The costume designer, Louise Meganbach, she estimates that production had gathered around 100,000 pieces of wardrobe by the end of the shoot and dressed between 2,000 to 3,000 people. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of extras. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I do kind of like the physical difference of Mystique's appearance compared to, Rebecca Romijn's appearance, because hers was, like, actually painted on. Like, poor Rebecca had to sit for hours getting that painted on rather than being a suit and all those individual flakes and whatnot and scales. So, like, good on Rebecca's part back 10 years ago. So I think that just shows just how much time has changed, and the character has changed as well. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a couple moments where when in close-ups, I'm like, you can tell it's a suit.
Oh yeah, definitely. I had that clear thought watching this. I was like, yeah, that's all one piece right now.
Yeah. The parts that don't have the little scales on their arms. It's just like, oh yeah, that's a leotard. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One of the things, particularly with Psylocke, Storm, Cyclops, and Mystique, the outfits and the characters' looks were designed to pay homage to their comic book counterparts differently from past films when X-Men used standard black uniforms. Cyclops' costume was taken from Jim Lee's blue and yellow design in the 1990s.
There you go.
Yeah, very cool. Editing-wise, so let's get to editing. Obviously, John Ottman, the great John Ottman, also edited this and also did the score. And the rough cut came in about 2 hours and
27 minutes.
The rough cut?
The rough cut? Oh, sorry, I thought you were talking about the whole.
That's a good rough cut.
No, you're right.
John Ottman's better than I thought.
The whole running time.
No. The rough cut was close to 2 hours and 50 minutes. So a lot of the stuff that they ended up cutting was the Jubilee mall scene. Which, Zach, do you have the video ready? I know you got mentioned.
Well, there was this cool. It's like an ad basically for Xavier's school with Jubilee, so I thought it'd be fun to
showcase,
to take a look at it for a second.
Definitely takes
it's so funny.
In the 80s.
Sometimes being gifted doesn't feel like a gift. Nobody seems to understand you. Sometimes they're even scared of you.
They even put the tracking marks
Wouldn't it be
in.
great if
It's
you
very
didn't have to worry
80s,
about hiding your gifts anymore?
The green.
Hi, Hi, I'm Jubilee, and it wasn't that long ago when I felt that way too.
She has more to
But then I
say in
became
this
a
ad
student at
than the
Xavier
entire
School for
film.
gifted youngsters, and everything changed.
Yeah, what was the fascination with Jubilee? I never really fully understood it.
I mean,
At
she was just
Xavier,
like
you'll
a
meet
fan
students
favorite
and
character
teachers
from the
who are
cartoon,
just
really.
like you
I think
and
more than
understand
anything else.
everything that you're
But what
going
did she
through.
do?
Under the
Yeah,
guidance
and
of
that's the thing is like I was
world-renowned Professor
watching this
Charles
film. I was just
Xavier.
trying to
You'll learn
recall
how to
like when
control
did we
yourself
ever really
while
see
also
Jubilee in
gaining
this film?
education
We
and
didn't.
training
We
that
just
you
saw her
need
like
to
in a
succeed
classroom,
in this
basically.
Yeah, and that was
like,
it.
She was just like
She went to the mall.
So
She
why
went to
be
the mall.
alone when you can make some excellent
got
new friends
cut.
here?
she-
Xavier's
well,
is no ordinary
but she was in the
school.
car.
Let's face it, you're no ordinary student. Thanks, Jubilee. You were right. Xavier's is totally rad.
Operators are standing by.
Can we call the number?
So 80s.
Did you notice whose voice that was at the end?
Stanley.
Yep.
That's just great.
Yeah, if you call the number, Stanley answers.
Oh,
It's
good.
Wow,
like, there's
nice.
nobody here. Excelsior!
That's
Hilarious.
awesome.
Very cool. And there was also a deleted scene between Scott and his brother, Alex.
Yes, which I think would have added more weight to, Alex's supposed death on screen, because we know that followed a big action scene, and then it's like, oh, he died, but the audience didn't see it because it was off screen, so we always have to wonder, did he really die? Because we didn't physically see it. So, and I think had they kept the scene between his brother and Scott and Alex saying goodbye to each other, I would have believed it more if Alex really died, because that would have been a conclusion, a goodbye closure scene.
Yeah, but I think it goes again, like, how many times do you get to say goodbye knowingly, like, this is going to be someone's last time? Like, I hate that portion of movies because it's like, oh, great, they got their,
Yeah.
and so I'm just not a fan of it, ultimately.
I'm just like they were able to for Blu-ray and home home entertainment wise for Days of Futures Past, like, because we talked to John, he was here for that movie, and he talked candidly about Rogue being really cut out of that movie, that they had what they he even called it the Rogue cut. But they just excised it for time-wise and such. But they put those scenes back in for a Blu-ray of that.
Has anyone seen this?
I
Yeah,
have, yeah.
It's a
Yeah,
great,
I like it.
cut. Like it doesn't change it. Like it changes it enough that it actually is not like just like a meaningless deleted scene. Like it does affect the characters.
Yeah, agreed.
But
Yeah.
like I can see why, like when you're trying to hit a time mark, that like,
Yeah.
because that's already a long movie, and then like the road cut is like 10, 12 minutes longer. So like I get why they did it, but if you're gonna rewatch it, like, yeah, watch the road cut. It's
Absolutely.
It's not like light years better, but it is a cooler story.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's good to hear, because oftentimes, trust me, there's plenty of people like, oh, I wish I got to see I'm like, there's a reason things sometimes
Sure.
get cut.
And
And
there's
so I'm
only
glad that's
been-
not the case.
Outside of that movie, the only person who I've known that's been able to have gotten away with adding more and making it like, so you're not just watching the deleted scenes, is like James Cameron, his extended version of T2 and the Abyss is a completely different movie once you put in the stuff that he took out for the theatrical release.
That's a long movie
And
itself.
that is a long
Shoot.
movie. So, but yes, just to reiterate, yeah, the Days of Future Past, the Rogue cut. I believe it's also been on like cable, like, and it'll even say like on HBO or whatnot, it'll say Rogue cut. But if you get a chance, I don't know if it's streaming on Netflix. I have the Blu-ray; it's available out there. It's worth seeing.
I mean, right now it's being replayed a lot on VOD and
Right.
various things. So.
And I remember because he had to go back because they took that out before he actually scored the movie.
Yeah, because
He had
he
to
could
go
only
back.
score what they had because he
Right.
didn't have any time.
And he, from a scoring purpose, they had to go back in and score that extra 12, 14 minutes to put in there. So, I wonder maybe they'll have the mall cut.
I don't know what the mall would add, unfortunately.
Outside of maybe some humor.
Yeah.
It's the perfect thing for the deleted scenes section
Absolutely.
of a DVD or Blu-ray.
Yeah, 'cause
like I want to see it. I didn't need it in the movie.
Yeah,
Right.
because apparently the mall scenes, everything that they cut from the mall was just all that, Gene, Scott, and Jubilee all just having fun at the mall,
Yeah.
being teenagers more
Sure.
so. And we don't need to see that because
Yeah.
we already know what that's like.
Yeah.
But again, like similar to the thing with like Magneto, like I think I was saying with Jesse Klein, one of the other hosts here, because we saw it together, and it's like I want to see the Harry Potter-esque version of X-Men where we're just like living with the kids in the school and seeing the drama around, because that's a lot of the X-Men comic books as well, is just like these kids going to school, and then like there's like battles and stuff they have to go for when there's evil out in the world, like the Brotherhood of Mutants like comes attacks. Oh, we have to fight them now. But it's all built around them just like growing up and like being in a school for people that are different. Like that's a fascinating story to me.
Right.
What happens when you go out to the mall with Nightcrawler?
Yeah.
That's a cool story. That's an interesting story and something that
And
I
how do they
absolutely want to
explain
see.
him?
Nightcrawler?
Yeah.
He's a mutant. People know what mutants are.
Yeah.
Like I don't think there's like, and that's the thing. Like again, like to like X-Men. Like if what X-Men is at its core, and that's like what all of these comic book movies need to find. Is like what is the story at its core? It's about people that are outside of society and struggling to deal with persecution. Like Nightcrawler going out is the same as like what if, and again because like the gay analogy has been in there since day one of X-Men. What if two of a gay couple went out to the mall and started holding hands as they walk? They would have problems with people in that small town. That's exactly the same thing that Nightcrawler is going to deal with as he walks through the mall. That's a movie I want to see, and I hope that Fox goes on the next one and goes smaller with it. Like goes to that point where it's like
X-Men the Mall?
X-Men the Mall. But like X-Men and the Order of the Phoenix. Like that's the next movie.
That'd be awesome.
If they title it that, I want all the royalties
Fair enough.
for
Jane
these
Goes
two
Phoenix
very popular
the
things
mall.
that are
And then
matching
you'll have
up.
to pay J.K. Rowling and then Warner Brothers. So good luck with that.
All right. Very, very good. Very good. By the way, going back to music, in addition to Sweet Dreams, the Four Horsemen is a song in the movie, obviously referring to the Four Horsemen, played, of course, by Metallica.
Yeah.
So it goes back to that punk rock angel song, which I thought, obviously it's a good song selection. I thought it was just a little much. I don't know, in that scene. Maybe because I'm not a big Metallica guy.
Yeah, me neither. I was like, okay, I understand the tone of what the scene is supposed to be. He's fighting.
Right.
Got it.
But in terms of the actual score, my like the opening with Egypt and everything like that, I thought it was just so grand between the cinematography and just the way Egypt looked, and then that.
Yeah, I mean,
it worked.
Yeah.
We talked a little John Ottman when we did Nice Guys, and he's having one hell of a year. I mean, he's had 2 movies come out within 2 weeks of each other that he's had a hand in, in being creative at. And I think X-Men Apocalypse and this movie is why I think just perhaps his most accomplished. You talk about that Egypt scene. I mean, we're not just talking orchestration. We're talking about like a type of a choir, like a men's kind of thing. Like that's Jerry Goldsmith, The Omen, like hinting like because you have that ominous like that, which is unsettling and such, and the Egypt, and then transitioning from that, going into that amazing. I thought the title sequence was amazing, and if you saw this in a premium large format screen in 3D, the title sequence was awesome. So you're from a music standpoint, you're going from this Egyptian setting up apocalypse, and then going into this superhero like type theme. It was brilliant. Brilliant.
I mean, I agree. Not to keep rehashing what you just said, but going from Egypt that had its own sound and chanting,
Yes.
ethereal kind of voice that is the creepiness of the Egyptian culture. Not to offend anyone, but like it has a very scary element to Egypt, and then going through that whole amazing timeline kind of transition that they had, showing like all the worldly things by decade. I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool to literally bring the audience back to like today's time of 1983, 84. I like that because it transitioned from Egyptian type of music to like the modern day music of that time. To, you know, when we had Angel and the Four Horsemen in Metallica.
Yeah.
So, like, two completely different sounds within, like, a few minutes of each other. Neat.
Yeah, it was, you know, and his score, it was, like I said, he brings together his orchestration in a much more refined way than he has. I think that, you know, his Superman Returns score is a fantastic homage to John Williams, yet he throws in his own like flair to it, and Days of Futures Past is another amazing score, and yet he can do a Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which is much smaller, and The Nice Guys, which is 70s.
Didn't he have only 4 weeks for Days of Future Past?
He had a very, and then not only that, but editing wise, if you remember, they asked for some changes at the very last minute, so he had to edit and score some things. Yeah.
I would like to know.
The
how
print
much
came
time,
very wet for Days of Futures Past.
doesn't it always?
Yeah.
But I would like to know how much time he had on both, which we might get a chance to do. It's looking like probably next week. So, you know, if you want to talk more Nice Guys and X-Men, we'll have John Ottman 90% in, let's say.
Let's say.
Why not? So, he's Demetri's good friend.
Oh, yeah. He emails me back.
Best buddies.
That's more than most people.
You're right. It's more than most people do.
Most people don't even have his email to.
He's been very kind.
So, indeed. All right, let's talk promotion.
Well, we saw that great clip, which was awesome.
Of
That was
Jubilee.
hysterical of Jubilee.
Absolutely. I want to get you guys there's obviously a lot of great promotion that came out of this, but then all of a sudden there's the poster, right? It's a billboard ad of Apocalypse choking Raven, which I thought was a great scene, which ironically, I will say this, I thought Raven should have died in that scene. But we're neither here nor there.
But you can't kill Jennifer Lawrence.
We're neither here nor there.
You can't kill America's sweetheart.
It's all right. It's
So-
like you wanted Famke Jensen in. I thought.
I know.
she should
I
play.
did want to find Jansen in, and I'm very disappointed she wasn't in this one. If you're gonna have Jean Grey, you might as well have the adult version of Jean Grey because she's awesome too.
Neither here nor there. We digress.
Sure. Yes, we do.
Actress Rose McGowan went on record saying, "There is a major problem when the men and women at 20th Century Fox think casual violence against women is the way to market a film." As told by Hollywood Reporter. But what do you guys think of this? Because I mean, here's
This is the billboard in question.
Yeah. I mean,
I think she does have a point. Good on Rose McGowan for saying this. I love Rose McGowan. She's an amazing actress too. I think for promotional wise, like, hey, I think the audience at this point were all fans of Mystique, and to see a villain take out Mystique, that would want the audience to go see it. Like, what's happening? You can't do this. So I'd give for promotional. The violence aspect, I don't think is the best billboard they could have had for this.
I don't think the problem is with violence. I think to me, number one, there was a better way to mark. Like, there's a better ad out there than this that will make people want to see it.
Yes.
Because they've proven that they can do it. I've got, I was always going to be sucked into this. It was X-Men, but I thought most of the marketing was clever. And this, it's a great image from the movie, obviously a very powerful one, but without any context, it doesn't necessarily hold weight for me.
I mean, in terms of like as far as marketing the movie, I thought it like definitely feels threatening since Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique is a lot of people's, especially the mass audience's favorite character. So the idea that she's under threat is it's engaging in that, like, oh my God, is she going to be okay? I have to see the movie. In terms of whether it's bad in terms of promoting, like if it's violence against women, I mean, it's not like this is the only billboard. That said, I can't speak to that perspective of like if this is like offensive to people, to victims of abuse. I mean, it's a bad guy, right?
To be fair, it's mutant on mutant crime. It's not.
Yeah, and it's almost.
Oh God.
Well,
I'm taking myself off the screen.
Look, I'm a huge proponent women on film, and their jobs and equal pay. Huge proponent on this. When I saw this billboard, the first thing through my mind was not violence against women. I think you made a good point. Like we know Mystique is a strong character. She is a fan favorite, and when you have a character under this kind of duress, under this kind of a threat, it could make it for the comic book crowd, for people who've been following X-Men. When you have your darling up under that kind of threat and pressure, there is that thing of suspense. I didn't take it as man against woman violence until I saw that Rose McGowan article, which just came out not too long ago. Mm-hmm. And you put it up there, and it's like, she's shaming Fox. Are we becoming so sensitive that, like, marketing campaigns, like, I get it. Can you be brilliant? Can you do a campaign that doesn't have this image in it? Yeah, you could. But does this image really go out? I mean, it says X-Men Apocalypse. Like, this isn't a woman in a refrigerator, kind of, which is a long-standing comic book issue about how comic books treat women. This is a powerful scene in the movie, and how it plays out and what happens. I think, oh wow, okay, so Mystique's in trouble. How she's going to get out of this? I was thinking more of character. Mm-hmm. I wasn't thinking of the grander scheme of, oh man, that's violence against women. That's really in poor taste. That's terrible.
But I think the issue is not that you immediately thought of that, but what she's saying is that it's become something that's casually put up there to where you don't even notice it or think about the fact that it's violence against women. I mean, and to be fair, you and I, Demetri, we're two straight white men. So we don't get that's the thing is I'm struggling. Like Marisa, did you sorry, you have to be the only woman that we can ask for on this panel, but did this make you feel uncomfortable at all as a woman, that seeing this billboard?
Honestly, I didn't know about this billboard until we discussed it now. But now that I hear that, yeah, I think it's really sad that we're at the point that we see it, but we didn't even think it's violence against women. We just saw it as a promotional still for people to get their butts in the theaters. And I think that's just sad that maybe our audience is kind of just desensitized to that.
Here's the thing. Zach, if you can do some quick... I want to see what Jennifer Lawrence maybe said about this, because obviously it's her that's in the image. But
I'll check. The news came out today, so she may not have even responded yet.
I don't think she will.
I'm not desensitized to utilizing and propagating violence towards women. There was a few years ago a billboard for a horror movie, I can't even recall its name, that was 100% exploitive. And I understood all of the criticisms against a woman who was bound up, and this was a billboard. I didn't find this to be exploitive in a way against women, so to speak. It was mutant. I get this is a mutant god character. This is our heroine Mystique Raven, who's in there, played by Jennifer Lawrence. I didn't look at it that way until I see Rose McGowan come out on this, and I was like, oh, okay. Look, there's so much there's so much out there with women being treated unfairly in Hollywood, and I'm, like I said at the top, I'm a big proponent of that. I get it. They should be treated more fairly. When I saw this billboard for the first time, this was not what came up. So what did you find?
Since we actually started airing, Fox has issued a statement on the subject. And they said they're apologizing. They said, in our enthusiasm to show the villainy of the character Apocalypse, we didn't immediately recognize the upsetting connotation of this image in print form. Until someone, they're saying, until someone called us out on it loud enough a week after the movie came out. Once we realized how insensitive it was, then the statement continues, we quickly took steps to remove those materials. We apologize for our actions and would never condone violence against women. So Fox is listening, and I guess they're going to take it down from at least where they are able to take it down from.
To be fair,
that's
didn't the
good.
MPAA approve this?
Yes.
So I'd be like, hey,
Yeah.
all fingers MPAA.
Well,
I don't
not
think they're
only did-
saying they did anything necessarily
No,
wrong.
they're
but
doing the right
But they're
thing.
they're
Yeah.
now sensitive and they're aware.
They're,
And
they're,
I
they're doing the right thing.
yeah, I think it's great that like yes, not a lot of people love Rose McGowan, but I think Rose McGowan was great enough to point that out to people who didn't think about it, and I think it's also because she didn't do it just to shame 20th Century Fox. She didn't do it, you know, she pointed that out to make people more aware of that, and it's not like a degrading in any way. It was a very professional way that she did it, and I think it's great that they're listening and they're actually taking that to heart.
Fair enough. So the other thing I wanted to, in promotion-wise, talk about before we get into box office. In a trailer version, there was reference to Krishna, one of the Hindu religious icons, and people got so upset that they made it take him out, and it got taken out of the movie as well. And I get upset by that because it's no different than, I mean, Apocalypse is trying to be God, so he can be a Christian, be the same way upset, but that's, again, he's a false prophet. Like, just that it's part of the storytelling. That to me is different, and I'm upset that, like, just why, people, why did that have to get taken out? What were you so affected? Like, that's the whole point, that this is a villain.
Right.
You know,
and again, yes, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. I agree. But did Fox issue a statement of apology?
Probably.
I mean, you know,
That we
and
didn't
again,
see
Fox did the right thing. They had this thing coming out. They're doing what they should be doing. But again, the religious thing, whether it's people on all fronts. I'm not even calling it desensitization. I didn't find it exploitive. The Krishna thing makes sense in this, and then but when a studio is forced,
but it was
whether
in there
religious,
as a point.
I get it. Yeah.
That's my problem with it.
Sure.
Like, they put it in the movie because this guy believes he is everyone's God.
Right.
You know?
But isn't this as a point? Like, do you look at the Raven character or the Mystique character as being throughout the entire series a vulnerable character? Absolutely not. She's a very strong character. We know that she can fight. We know that she has great powers. So if she's being outpowered by somebody bigger than her, I mean, doesn't that raise the stakes? Much like if that's the point of a religious thing. And if you take out for the religious, then you take out for this too.
Yeah, I think it's just you add the word religion to it, and it's already gonna throw up. No, unfortunately, it's gonna throw up red flags for a lot of people.
I agree.
And I mean, everyone has the different beliefs and religions, and if you're going to offend a whole culture of that, then yeah, maybe you should be sensitive to that too.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we're fast running out of time.
I wanted to talk. Are we going to do any Easter eggs at all? Because I mentioned something early.
Let's do the top ones. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, for me, it was my favorite Easter egg of all, and it's so paralleled, and it's so like it mirrored the philosophy of what's going on in the movie. So when he was learning from TV. All right, there was a television show that was on. That television show, even though you didn't see any of its iconic characters, that television show was Star Trek from the original series. And it was from an episode called Who Mourns for Adonis? And basically, in a nutshell, what that episode is about is that the crew of the Enterprise is captured by one of the original Greek gods, Apollo. Okay, and he is alone on this planet, and he wants worshipers and followers, and the Enterprise comes by, and he's like, oh, this would be fantastic. I'm going to capture them. I'm going to put them on, I'm going to kidnap them, put them on this planet. They're going to have an amazing life so long as they worship me. And Captain Kirk is like, screw you, buddy. That ain't happening. Like, we don't, no, you can't kidnap us. Tell us to worship you and force us into worship, and you go, as the episode goes on, you realize the reason why they've left Earth is because on Earth, people stopped believing in gods, in various gods, and the gods just drifted away and disappeared into the ether. And Apollo, who just ended up on this planet, he wanted what every god wants is followers and believers. And he felt that the crew of the gallant, valiant Enterprise, they were going to be his followers. So I found it very interesting that particular episode was chosen to be the scene that was watching on TV. And again, unless you're a huge Star Trek nut like me, like the Captain Kirk wasn't in it, but as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, Who Mourns for Adonis? Thematically, it's so tied into Apocalypse.
Yeah,
And
you have and speaking of, you have
Do you think that's
confirmation
John?
of that is definitely John.
That is
He has
definitely John. I have confirmation on that because we know that John Ottman's a Star Trek fan. In an email I wrote, and I said, "Was that your idea?" I go, "It looked like that was your idea," and he wrote back. He goes, "Yeah, that actually was." And I was like, "Well played." That was fantastic. But thematically, and again, they did it in Days of Futures Past, where a security guard was watching an episode of Star Trek, and it was a time travel episode. But this one, I think, even more to the point, with false prophets, false gods, and gods wanting to take over because they want believers, they want followers. So, and that's where I took Apocalypse from.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll skip a couple of the other ones unless someone has a really pertinent one. But
I mean, the post-credit sequence.
Yeah.
Do you guys stay?
Yes.
we
Yeah.
did. You want to hold that for when we talk about sequels, Zach?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So yeah, I mean, if you want the rest of the Easter eggs, there's plenty of articles and videos that are equally as great. So let's get into numbers. Not as much as people expected this to make, especially over Memorial Day weekend, unfortunately. But it got a good audience score, A-.
Yeah,
So
for cinema.
I don't necessarily understand why. And maybe you guys do. I mean, opening weekend overall, 65 million.
Right.
That I would have.
Are you saying you don't understand why it got a good audience score, or why it didn't do well in the box office?
Why it didn't do so good in the box office with an A- cinema score?
I mean, to be honest, I'm surprised that the cinema score is that high. I don't think this movie inspires repeat viewing. Like Civil War, like I saw twice opening weekend and wanted to go back a third time. And I think for comic book movies, that's probably why it does so well. I think Civil War coming out so recently also probably hurt it. People weren't waiting for another superhero movie so quickly.
Yeah, I think it's like to that point. Again, we mentioned it at the top of this dissection that this is like the 6th comic book movie out, and I think at this point of the year, people are just maybe a little too over the head with comic book movies.
Well, you talk about repeat viewing; those grosses don't really hit until like your midweeks, and they'll give the good hold for second week. I mean, there's only so many repeat viewings that, and again, that faction, that percentage of those people who are going opening weekend 4 or 5 times, like that's like you're getting a cross when Civil War does that great. You're getting just a ton of people going to the movies. And you're getting a percentage of those people who will go see the movie once, twice, maybe 3 times. But a lot of the repeat viewings will take place during your midweeks, which leads to good holds during the midweeks and then a good hold for your second weekend. Now, you said it was an A- on Cinema Score, but its Rotten Tomatoes last check was about at a 48%, which is, I believe, Days of Futures Past was in the high 80s, I believe. High 80s, very low 90s. So, critically, the movie was, it's sort of in that middle of the road. I think 48% categorizes as rotten on Rotten Tomatoes, anything below like a 50 or 55.
Days of Future Past had a 91%
there you go.
on Rotten Tomatoes, so it did significantly better than I'm seeing what Apocalypse is standing at as of now.
It was at 48.
Okay.
I have it at 49, so someone
Could
bumped
be.
it up.
So it's still fairly lower.
But you had this.
48 as it
48%.
stands.
Yeah. So, what I found very interesting, and again, is that I looked up Last Stand did 58%, and that to me, like it shouldn't. That's not 10 points higher than Apocalypse. Now, Wolverine received a 38%. That's 10 points lower than than Apocalypse, and I'm fine with it. I mean, I'm talking about two really bad movies. Like, there's no way, if people look at Last Stand, that you can say that that's a better movie than Apocalypse. I mean, not from a direction standpoint, from a story standpoint. I just don't understand. I don't get. I almost think that people really forget what bad movies are like.
To be fair, I'm not always on board with Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, me neither.
Like, there's some ones that have like a 90%, and I'm like, and yet, like, let's say I again, this is not. I'm just pulling stuff out for example purposes. Let's say like Gone with the Wind has an 85. Versus again, like Days of Future, like is Days of Future Past potentially? You know what I mean? And it's like, how?
I know, but
and in fairness, those are
research,
also
that's what's out there.
Yeah, those are also your opinions of those two movies, because there are some fans out there that really loved Wolverine and X-Men: The Last Stand, and might have put those movies higher than this one in their taste.
I would have to say.
Hey, listen to Guilty Movie Pleasures on
I'm
They Did
speaking
Last
for the
Stand
ones
as a...
are for the few. So, like, just to be devil's advocate. But it's like, and I think, the critics and Rotten Tomatoes, it's again, I think at the end of the day, it's really your opinion of the movie, not what everyone else is saying.
For what it's worth, I put this movie on par with The Last Stand for me.
Oh.
That's my opinion. Like, I know people will have different opinions, but for me, The Last Stand, like, I knew why everyone was doing the things that they did. They may have been bad decisions, but I got the why. I got the threat of, like, the cure. Like, that alone was, like, a bigger threat to me than Apocalypse.
Yep.
Yeah. To be fair, I will admit this. I actually didn't mind The Last Stand. I actually didn't, to be honest. Was it
I'm kind of
good
biased on
as other stuff? No, but I didn't mind it. All right. Let's talk about the sequel, right? Mr. Sinister of the Essex Corporation. Zach, since this was your Easter egg and you wanted to get to it most.
Oh, I mean,
open us up?
For me, like, this implies that they're going to do. It can sort of is more fuel to the fire of a rumor that's been going around for a while, which is that the next incarnation we're gonna get a character called X-23.
Okay.
Which X-23 is the female clone of Wolverine, who's very popular right now in the comic books. All the current run, all different Wolverine is her. Logan is not the lead character in the Wolverine book, and she's a fantastic character. And like, so them taking the blood, the DNA of Wolverine, like, away is like, oh well, now in Wolverine 3 we're probably going to get X-23. That was the implication to me.
This is a way to finally retire Hugh Jackman but still have Wolverine.
Yeah, you can. Well, that's the way you can still have Wolverine running around in terms of like how you use him in fight sequences and like just like battles and all that. But you don't have to recast such a role that is so tied to one actor as it is with Hugh Jackman and Wolverine.
Well,
and talk about having a female lead and a strong female lead. There you go.
And while plot details about the threequel are scarce, we do know that Richard E. Grant has been cast as a villainous mad scientist type, which potentially fits under the Mr. Sinister to a T. Mm-hmm. So, and that's to be into the Wolverine 3. So it'll be interesting.
I think so too. And Singer is not going to be in the next film. Right away. Kinberg is also taking a quick break. Whether or not they come back remains to be fully seen. But I think they're open to it, but they just need a break right now.
I think I'm totally on board for that. The X-Men franchise needs a new voice.
Yeah.
More than anything, it needs I'm excited for stuff like the New Mutants. They haven't really announced what the cast of that's going to be. Rumor is like Storm will be involved, among others, but that's going to be fun because, again, that's going to be a smaller scope picture. And the X-Men are so diverse. Like, you could do a story about most of these characters on their own or in small groups. And I think that's the type of sequels we need to be seeing. Like, Deadpool succeeded with just one or two characters from this universe. You can focus in more and do just a simple revenge story, and it's way more engaging than the world is going to end. Because the only way to up the ante after we fought and defeated a god is to go cosmic and go into space, and I don't think they need to do that right now.
Well,
Yeah,
they said they wanted to, but
I'm just trying to think, like, again, you mentioned Deadpool. They were supporting characters. Like, they weren't, like, the main characters.
Oh, no, I just meant Deadpool, like Deadpool as a character.
Right.
Like, he carried that movie
Absolutely.
with supporting people. There's no reason you can't take a character like Magneto and just do Magneto, the movie.
well, Singer thinks Mystique would make a strong spin-off or whatever you want to call it. But anyway,
I could see it.
there you have it. I'm still fighting for X-Men the Mall, but so be it. Let's see if that happens. Any final thoughts as we wrap this up?
Overall, I think it was a good movie to keep the character, like, introduce new faces and to the same characters that we know and love. And I think it definitely opens the door for more stories that the audience can love.
There you go. Demetri?
Yeah, again, I found it to be a solid entry into this X-Men franchise, the three that Bryan Singer has put together. If Bryan Singer after this, much like Chris Nolan after his three, if he decides to, hang up his directing spurs on X-Men and go into other things, I always find him to be an interesting director. I'm glad, he's a fan of comic books. So I'm glad, with Superman Returns going back into X-Men, he has a passion and love for these characters, and I always got that from his X-Men movies. It would be very interesting to see what he does next.
Yeah,
so always, this is a guy that brought us The Usual Suspects. So
there you go. Zach, last thoughts from you.
Ultimately, I stand by how I opened this. Like, I was disappointed by this movie as a movie. It had some great, like, comic book fan moments, like the Phoenix, like Nightcrawler, Cyclops. Like, in that shot with all of them in their costumes is just like a great, just like fan squee moment. But as a movie, as like a filmmaker, I thought that this movie ultimately it failed.
Okay. Well, fair enough. Let us know what you guys think at home. Would love to get your guys' opinion. Maybe even out of curiosity, where does it rank for you guys ultimately? Is it better than Last Stand? Is it worse than Last Stand? Who knows? But that's where you get to decide and let us know. And let us know what your favorite Easter egg is. There's so much to talk about with this movie. We could just go on and on and on, but we won't.
favorite X-Men character.
That's right.
Favorite
X-Men character not in the movie. All that stuff. So thank you guys for joining us. In the meantime, if you guys want to interact with us directly, DMovies1701, talk about a Star Trek reference.
Go ahead, please.
Yep. Serafini TV on Twitter.
And that, Zach Wilson.
Yep. That's on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube.
That's Zach with a CH.
That is correct.
For some reason.
That's how you spell it. It's the proper spelling.
Says
FIL.
All right, and follow us here at Movie Anatomy at the Popcorn Talk. Like I said, if you liked Last Stand better, check out Guilty Movie Pleasures because they made an argument for that movie here on Popcorn Talk. We of course have a Marvel movie show that talks all things Marvel, so check that out. They're talking this, and for us, what we've got coming up, we've got Alice Through the Looking Glass, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Pop Star, a little movie called Star Trek Beyond. Yeah. I'm sure Demetri won't want to be a part of that.
Nope.
But we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
I'm opening. We have an eye.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff, we would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.